Welcome to the Escape into Board Games podcast.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
And this is our escape from the real world where we talk about board games.
In this episode, we look at word games that involve spelling and word crafting.
You might say that we're going to provide you with several superior spelling games that supersede Scrabble.
So please join us for the Escape into Board Games podcast. Scrabble is the original tile placement spelling word game for 2 to 4 players, designed by Alfred Mosher Butts in 1948.
For almost 75 years, Scrabble has dominated the board game market, and with maybe the small exception of Boggle and Spill and Spell, Scrabble has cornered the market on spelling games.
Scrabble has achieved the Herculean feat for a board game of household name. It's a testament to its enduring legacy. Not many board games have been enjoyed for generations.
An equivalent in literature might be Goodnight Moon, The Lord of the Rings, or George Orwell's 1984.
When Scrabble was released, the most successful movies were Pinocchio, Casablanca, and The Wizard of Oz. It's fun to imagine the game of Scrabble as the Casablanca of board games. Both the movie and the classic board game are quality entertainment. But we are not going to watch Casablanca every Saturday night, and we didn't stop making movies after we made The Wizard of Oz. In fact, we went on to make 10 Fast and the Furious movies.
And it is in that spirit that we bring you several superior spelling games that supersede Scrabble. So Scrabble isn't a game that I've played recently. I know that it had some popularity recently on people's phones.
That's right.
People were playing with each other on their phones.
It was called Words with Friends.
Words with Friends, which I think, I didn't play that one, but I assume that was just a clone of Scrabble.
I believe
that
so.
People played on their phones. I missed that whole cell phone gaming phase. And I haven't played Scrabble in a while, but it's one that I do enjoy. It is one that it brings back fond memories of playing with my parents, my grandparents, of, the few times that you get that 7-letter word and it's just amazing and you're just so proud of yourself as a young person. And it's one that, I feel like there are better games. There are games that fix some of the things that I don't like about it, but it's still one that I would play again.
There's a reason why Scrabble has been around for almost 75 years. It's a great game. But personally, I find there's a lot of analysis paralysis for me when I play that game, generating the words, figuring out where the words can go, and then on top of that, realizing, this isn't optimal point-wise. If I could put a 5-letter word over here and earn 12 points, or a 3-letter word over there and earn 26 points because of the geography of the score tiles. And I find that just, it hampers me. And I feel guilty about the other players at the table who have to wait for me to take my turn. And for me, there are better games.
I think that the analysis paralysis part is it's a big thing in this game, and the waiting for the other player to come up with their word can be frustrating. And the games that I've included on the list sort of solve that problem really well. Analysis paralysis is when you are stuck considering the many choices of where you can go, what you can do on your turn, and it is hindering your ability to make a decision and proceed with the game. Actually, Matt, one of the games on my list, I feel, does solve all of the problems that most people, and myself in particular, have with Scrabble. I feel like it's the perfect replacement for Scrabble. But that's more on that game later. Bananagrams. Bananagrams is a real-time tile placement spelling word game for 1 to 8 players, ages 7 and up. It plays in about 15 minutes and was designed by Rena and Abe Nathanson. And it was published by Bananagrams, Inc. in 2006. In Bananagrams, players work independently to use all their tiles and create their own crossword-style words faster than their opponents. The game happens in real time with all players creating their words simultaneously in front of them. The first player to use all their letters calls out bananas and wins the game. I think that Bananagrams is a gem for Scrabble fans.
Absolutely.
I think it's a truly modern replacement for the classic word game of Scrabble.
It's significantly lighter than Scrabble, right? It's the family weight.
Yes.
A little bit sillier.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the bag alone.
Yes. It does
comes a little yellow bag in the shape of a banana. What's not to love?
Yeah, this little zip up fabric banana where all the tiles get stored in and sits on your shelf. It sits there and people go, oh, what is that? Well, actually, do you like Scrabble? You're going to love this game. It plays really, really fast. You can play several games in a row with no problem. It can play with kids of many different ages together with adults. When you're putting the words together, you can use small words or large words. It's entirely up to you. You're creating this sort of crossword grid of words, and you can even say, you know what? I need the letters from this word and take them out of your crossword grid and reuse them in other words to create better words that use up your tiles more efficiently.
So once you've committed to putting letters down, you can rearrange that grid any way you want.
You can rearrange them, exactly. And as you draw new tiles, you may find that exactly that. Like, oh, now I really need that Q or that Z that I used.
Yeah. So you're taking a few steps backward, but hopefully then
yeah.
Interesting.
Bananagrams takes one of the biggest complaints about Scrabble, which is downtime, and it completely eliminates it because players are literally playing at the same time.
Yeah.
And there is a bit of a frantic pace to it. And it kind of becomes this meta game, this game within a game where, at least when I play it, where you are adding pressure with the sounds and the noises that you make. And you're constantly pulling new tiles going, telling people split, and you've got new words and you've got new letters. And you're going, oh, look at that. That's a good one. Oh, and you're just making everyone more excited and nervous about it all.
So after you've gone through your personal supply and you've built your words with your own personal tiles, you then go to the main pot tiles and draw a new tile.
Yes.
Forcing everybody else to do so.
Exactly. Yes.
And so if you can make your word grid faster than your opponent, then you've got this added pressure of, oh, here's another tile to add. Here's another tile to add.
Exactly.
And there's this.
Yeah, they're constantly getting new letters thrown at them. Yeah. Which in some ways can be good because it helps them spell certain words.
More options.
Yeah, it gives them more options, but it also adds this tension, this speed element that it's like, oh no, they're really getting better at me. I got to move. I got to get faster. And for me, that sort of game within the game adds so much fun to Bananagrams.
My one play of it, I remember it being very frenetic and there being that timer pressure. Because you're getting more tiles and more resources to build more words. But at the same time, you look at this table and the main pile in the table is being slowly more and more depleted. And when it's gone, that means the game is going to be over soon. And whoever has the most, right? There's only going to be one winner.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game.
So growing up, my mom loved Scrabble and was constantly begging, mostly my dad, because I would play it with her, but constantly begging my dad and us to play with her. And when I got into modern board gaming, I found Bananagrams and, knew instantly this is one that she would like and that, the rest of the family would play with her because it did solve some of the problems. And she really, really enjoyed it. And that kind of opened her eyes to this bigger world of board games and joining us for other games and playing other games while we do not just word related games. Yeah.
That's awesome. You find something that somebody likes and build upon it. Yeah. That's great. I'm glad she liked it. That's awesome.
And Scrabble is such a universal game, right? Like everybody knows it, and it's every generation is familiar with Scrabble. So you can say it's like Scrabble, but faster.
Yeah. It's like Scrabble, but we play it all at the same time.
Yeah. And all of a sudden you've got someone's interest and they know what they're doing in the game. And Bananagrams actually has a pretty large community of fans that I remember when I first started playing Bananagrams, I found that they had created their own variants, and there's this community out there of people that play Bananagrams quite a bit, which is a cool thing.
Nice.
That's Bananagrams.
Word on the Street. Word on the Street is a fast-paced, team-based party word game for 2 to 10 players, ages 12 and up. Designed by Jack Degnan and published by Amigo in 2009. In Word on the Street, there is a line of letter tiles down the middle of a long, skinny board that is made to look like a road. The letters are in the median, with 2 empty lanes on either side. Players are divided into 2 teams. On your team's turn, you draw a category card, which might read, the name of a city, or something that plugs in, or a type of cake. And you and your teammates scramble to find a word that contains as many letters as possible that fits that category. Then you spell out your chosen word, pulling each letter from the word into the lane next to it towards your side of the board, all within 30 seconds. There's a sand timer. When the timer runs out, you have to stop moving letters. The object of the game is to be the first team to pull 8 letters off of your side of the board. So because there's 2 lanes on either side of the center strip, there's 5 different positions that any of the letters could be in this tug of war. So sometimes you're making decisions based on preventing the other team from scoring a letter and bringing it closer to the middle, while other times you're trying to finish off letters that are close enough for scoring on your side. But the real gem of this game is the gentle heckling that comes from the other team while your 30-second timer is running down. You don't have to be a terribly good speller in this game because you have your team's group to help you spell. And so I find that there's a little less stress for the bad speller in your group for this game. And the added timer eliminates any of this analysis paralysis that we find ourselves with Scrabble. But I got to say, this is like the code names of spelling games because of that heckling you have between the 2 teams where, is that really the best word you can come up with?
Yeah.
Maybe up? Could you be up would work. What about at? You good with at? Right?
And the timer really helps with that. Like it just
30 seconds just goes by like that. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the bigger your team is, I mean, it can be played with 3 or 4 players, but if you have a team of, 3 or 4 players on each side, it just gets harder and harder to agree on the word within and there has to be someone who just alpha games it and says, okay, we're going to choose this word and start spelling.
It's definitely in the lighter end of the spelling games. No one's taking Word on the Street to a tournament.
No, probably not.
But it is so much fun for, I find, just a slightly wider audience because you have those handicaps, the group mentality of the timer. It just eases things, smooths out the edges.
Yeah. Now, I believe you when you say that timer is 30 seconds. But if I had to have guessed, I would have said it was more like 12 to 15 seconds. Because it seems to go by lightning fast.
And it gets shorter as the game goes on. I mean, I don't know how they do that.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the sand just slips out of that sand timer. It's very true.
You notice that there's like 4 tiles on your opponent's side. They could easily win with any of those. And then there's 3 on your side. And you're like, how do I come up with a word that contains a B, a T, an S, and an M?
Exactly.
Right? It's just
Exactly. So the game doesn't have any vowels, correct? It doesn't have any vowels, and it doesn't have a couple other ones.
There's no vowels. There's no X, J, Q, or Z. I think there's 17 letter tiles in total that you play with.
So that's good because you don't have to come up with Z and J words, but it also, you're not getting points per se. It's not really a point system, but you're not able to use the most common letters or E and A to get the letters to the tiles to your side of the road.
Exactly. It's all consonants. And what's interesting, if you do like the word letter, you're going to score the T twice because it's in the word twice.
Right.
And so
So you'd get 1 L,
Yeah.
2 T's, and 1 R for the word letter. That's excellent. Yeah, this is a really fun game. We've played this one a lot, and so much so that there's an expansion. I had to track down the expansion and play.
No way.
With just a number of more questions. There's nothing else that adds to the game. It's just more questions. So one of the rules that we play with, and I don't know if this is actually a house rule that we just sort of created or if it's actually in the rules. I can't remember at this moment. But we play where one team distracts the thinking team for that 30-second timer the whole time. I could almost rename the game Distraction because that's what our games have turned into. It's about distracting the other team. And we've gotten really quite good at it. Like saying, oh, no, that's not a word. You can't use that word. And people go, what? Why can't we use that word? He said we can't use the word. No, he's just trying to distract you.
Oh, that's not fair. You can't say they're getting the rules wrong. I find the heckling to be in the same vein as code names.
Right.
When people are coming up with clues and you're like, distract them with tangents that just,
yes.
You pretend to be on part of their team and you're giving helpful, suggestions, but they're not helpful suggestions.
They're not helpful. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like really short words or words that score letters that have already been scored or
exactly.
Involve letters that aren't in contention. Right. It's just gently.
Something that has a ton of vowels in it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I find that, that really makes the game. Again, it's sometimes not the game you play, but who you play with.
Yes.
With the right group that this one really shines.
Spell Smashers. Spell Smashers is a fantasy fighting spelling card game for 1 to 5 players aged 12 and up. It plays in about an hour, depending on the number of players, and is designed by Christopher Chung and published by Renegade Games in 2018. Players are adventurers fighting monsters by forming a long word using the cards from their hand and matching the icons displayed on those cards with those printed on the monster they want to attack. Each letter card has a damage value, and you add up the values from the word that you created, adding any damage from your weapons or other gear to determine how much damage you do to the monster that you're attacking. Like many fantasy games, initiative is really important in Spell Smashers. Your initiative is decided by how many letters there are in the word that you spelled, and that gives you the ability to strike at the monsters before anyone else. After attacking, the monster will attack you and give you wound cards that provide you with more letters, some of which are multiple letter cards or letters that are harder to use in words. Defeated monsters also provide you with a permanent letter that you can use in all future words. After everyone has had a chance to attack the monsters, players visit the town to heal their wounds, purchase new cards and tokens that will help them make better words and defeat monsters in the future. They can receive new quests that might provide victory points at the end of the game. The winner is the player who has the most victory points. You get points from defeating monsters, completing quests, purchasing weapons and other gear, ale tokens, and the money that you've collected during the game. In many ways, Spell Smashers is kind of a marvel accomplishment in game design, in my opinion. It's a great word game with an actual theme.
Yeah.
And it combines two very different kinds of gaming experiences. Fantasy adventure gaming with word and spelling games. As strange as that sounds, the game really works. The theme comes together in a fun and interesting way. I think finding players that like both of these kinds of games may be difficult, but it definitely won't be disappointing. It's an excellent mid-weight game that works very well and combines the gameplay with theme superbly.
Yeah.
For me, Matt, the genius of Spell Smashers is adding in the phase where players visit the town to lick their wounds, visit the local tavern and swap tales, and they hear about their new quests and purchase gear. Mm-hmm. That really is a brilliant addition to this game, and it makes that theme of, the role-playing adventure or that kind of thing really come to life.
Yep.
And it's part of the game. It's built right into what you need to do on every turn. And it makes your character feel much more real than you're just playing a word game where we're spelling words. which is all you're doing, but the theme comes to life.
Yeah, I think it's tremendous that they've applied a theme so successfully to a word game.
Yeah.
Like, it's immersive. The art is fantastic. The components are...
The art is really good.
Right? Are really, really great. And when you think of word games and spelling games in particular, you can't think of theme. How would you even apply that?
Yeah.
We just talked about word on the street. There's a road.
That's the theme.
There's no theme there. There's no theme there, right? Like, spelling games are notoriously themeless, and that this one set out to do something that would seem impossible.
Yeah.
But accomplishes so well.
It does it very well, I think. I'd say that this isn't a simple game. There's a lot of game here, and it's probably not one that I would introduce to someone who is new to modern board games, someone who had just only ever played Scrabble.
Yeah, a bit of a step up.
Like, I'm a big fan of Scrabble. Oh yeah, do you want to play this new game, Spell Smashers, and try it out? Yeah, it feels like there's a lot more going on. There's a few more moving parts.
Sure. Than
I would probably introduce them to right away. You know, like, even though your players are limited by the cards that they have in their hand every turn, there's a lot of movement there with all the different options. Like, you can use tokens, which are thematically, they are potions that let you change the way certain letters are used. You can use the monsters. They give you letters and that kind of thing. Like many word games, Spell Smashers can suffer from downtime as players take time thinking of the word and maximizing all their options of what they can do and the best attack and what monster they want to attack. And it can take a really long time to play this game at a full player count. The 2 or 3 player game is probably my sweet spot, like where I think it's perfect.
Yeah.
And that's, the sort of hour to an hour and a half. I've heard that with the full player count of 5, it can take 2 or 3 hours sometimes.
Wow.
At that point, it becomes a bit cumbersome, I think. But it's an excellent game. And if you are at all interested in the theme and you like word games, then this is definitely one that you should try.
Nice. We're going to get back to the show after a brief message. This next ad is for Chris's own company, Geeky Goodies. If you'd like to hear what an ad for your game, product, or website might sound like, drop us a line at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. When we escape into board games, we're always wearing our Geeky Goodies t-shirts.
They are great conversation starters for gamers and non-gamers.
But did you know that they also sell masks, socks, hoodies, game room posters, mugs, and so much more?
All things board games.
All things geeky.
Visit geekygoodies.com and use coupon code ESCAPE for a 10% discount off your purchase.
Letter Jam. Letter Jam is a cooperative, limited communication deduction word game for 2 to 6 players, ages 10 and up. Designed by Andras Skupe, Letter Jam is published by Czech Games Edition and released in 2019. In Letter Jam, players start with a 5-letter word, 1 letter per card, shuffled up, face down in front of them. This is a fully cooperative game where everyone is working together. And to win, everyone needs to correctly deduce the word that they've been given. Each player has a standee that allows them to prop up one of their cards. Players each pose a letter facing away from them so that everyone else at the table can see it but them. There's always 6 letters showing, so if you have less than 6 players, dummy decks are created. On your turn, players simultaneously try to generate words using as many letters around the table as possible. This might look like long periods of silence, followed by someone suggesting a 3-letter word, and then someone else suggesting they can create a 5-letter word, but using one player's letter twice, and then maybe even another player saying they can generate a 6-letter word, but they have to use a wild. Once all the players have agreed whose clue to use, that player will take these thick, beautiful number tokens and spell out their word. So let's say the clue was picnic. They would place the 1 token next to Jonathan's P, the 2 token next to Veronica's I, the 3 token next to Danielle's C, the 4 next to Ajith's N, and then the 5 back on Veronica's I again, and the 6 on Danielle's C. So that Jonathan sees Icnic, Veronica sees the picnic without the I's, and Danielle sees the picnic without the C's, and Ajith sees the picnic without the N. And in this way, they can deduce what their own letter might be. Everyone gets a pencil and paper, and the game comes with these color-coded tables for easy note-taking. There's a timer mechanism so that players are limited in the number of clues that they can use. And the less clues you use, the higher the team's score. Yes, it's a game, but we're not, you either succeed or you don't. We're not keeping track. I find it's like Telestrations or Concept, in that you're playing against the game and you either win or you lose. I find, at least when I play, I haven't been keeping track of the scores. You've played Letter Jam, right, Chris?
Yeah, we've played this a lot. This is one of our newest obsessions. We've played this one a lot recently, and it's good. I think it's excellent for introducing to new people into games, and it is so much fun. I love the way you described it. That was excellent. You described it as, it might look like long periods of silence. It doesn't sound particularly exciting when you say it like that, but that is perfectly described.
It's a deduction game after all, right? We talked earlier just how we have combined spelling with fantasy games, and there's the spelling with a timed element. Well, now we're doing spelling in a deduction game.
Yeah.
And as you know, I love deduction games. They're one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite mechanisms. And yeah, and in all deduction games, there's just this, scratching your chin, staring at the board, and your mind is just burning. It's on fire. How can I? And it's tremendous that you're playing together as cooperatively. And this is another thing that we're seeing a lot of lately is cooperative deduction games, which I think is a nice take on it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not one that you would like tune in to, the board game channel to watch the championship letter jam competition, because
it might be a little dull. Yes, to watch that as a spectator.
Yeah, it is really, really a fun game, and it's all about coming up with the best clues, finding the perfect word that everyone around, or most players around the table, can get a little bit of information from and still be able to figure out their word.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'd say this and Codenames would make my list of games every board gamer must own. I think Letter Jam and Codenames would definitely go in there.
The components are pretty straightforward in this game. It's a deck of cards with letters on them and little standees to prop them up. The notepad paper that you use to keep track of the clues is laid out really, really well. Because your number tokens are colored, the 1 is red and the 2 is yellow, I think, and the green, then the columns on your sheet are also shaded that color too, to help you keep track of which letter goes where, which letter is yours. Because you're not obviously going to figure out what your letter is with one clue. It's going to take a few clues. Like, just say you have R blank TS.
Yeah.
Well, it could be rats.
Ruts,
right? You don't know. And so you can make assumptions, but you really want to know what your letter is before you move on to your next letter. And so you meticulous note taking, and the next clue will come around and hopefully narrow it down for you.
And you had mentioned that you don't really use scoring. I find that surprising. We always look at how well we did when we play. We're like, how tasty was that jam? Oh, it was a 1 strawberry of tastiness. Oh. Wordsy. Wordsy is a real-time word game for 1 to 6 players, ages 10 and up, and it plays in about 20 minutes. It was designed by Gil Hova and published by Formal Ferret Games in 2017. In Wordsy, players are racing to come up with a word using as many of the 8 letter cards face up in the middle of the table as they can. The first player to come up with a word flips the 30-second timer, forcing every other player to come up with a word within that time. Players are not limited by the letters on the table. They can add any additional letters that they like, but they score no points for the letters that aren't on the table. After 7 rounds, players add the scores of their best 5 words, plus any bonuses they achieve during the game, and the player with the most points wins. So Wordsy is the game that I think solves all of the issues that I've heard most about Scrabble over the years.
That is a tall order, sir.
It really is. And it certainly does the time thing really well. It is a fast game to play.
Yeah.
You can make any word that you can think of, but score only points for the letters available. And actually, it's one of those that the ability to spell or not spell isn't a hindrance. You just have to basically get pretty close to the spelling of the word, because as the word gets spelled, people will correct you if you've got it wrong.
Sure.
And you can add any letters from your head that you want to the table anyway. You don't get points for those.
Yeah.
But you can add them. So it's a game that can be played with people who, English isn't their first language, people who are, learning to read, younger people, and they can do just as well with someone who, is a Scrabble wizard or guru and have a chance.
Yeah.
And the fact that at the end of the game, you only use your 5 best words that scored you the most points out of all 7 that you did is another factor that sort of gives you this chance to level the playing field in a lot of ways.
Nice.
The timer is a bit of a competitive or player interaction part that I think is missing from Scrabble, but it only adds, it's a fast game. Like it's a 30-second timer, and now everybody has pressure to go out and come up with their words. So that person who in Scrabble can take 20 minutes coming up with their 7-letter triple word score game, that skill that they've honed over many years of playing Scrabble isn't useful to them because you can come up with your word really quickly and force them to have 30 seconds to come up with their word. So that works really well.
We played this game a lot with Julia when she was just first starting to read, and it was to work on her vocabulary.
That's excellent.
Work on her spelling. And you're right, it is a terrific game for that, leveling the playing field between, an older person and a younger person, or a good speller, bad speller. You do have to rely on your vocabulary, of course, but
you don't get penalized for not being an excellent speller. It doesn't matter if the word has an I after the E or an E after the I. And if you can play this game with, those different kind of skill levels, and they can do well, it makes it much more fun for the family game kind of element that is Scrabble.
Yep.
So that's Wordsy. Wordsy to me beats Scrabble. I'd say if you like Scrabble and you're looking for a game that you want to play with your parents or grandparents, I cannot recommend Wordsy enough. It is definitely my favorite of all the word games.
Paperback and Hardback. 2 separate games, Paperback and its successor, Hardback, are both deck-building, card-drafting, spelling word games for 2 to 5 players, ages 10 and up. Paperback was designed by Tim Fowers, and Hardback was designed by Jeff Beck and Tim Fowers. Both contain art by Ryan Goldsberry and are published by Fowers Games. In both games, players start with a small deck of letter cards, and on your turn, you draw a small hand of cards and use them to create words. The cards that successfully fit into words generate currency that allow you to buy new cards to put into your deck, so in future turns you can create bigger and better words. Bigger and better words in future turns allow you to buy even bigger and better cards. So when I first heard there was a deck-building version of Scrabble, I thought that was it. That has solved all of Scrabble's problems, right? Deck builders are fantastic. We could do an entire episode just on deck builders.
We definitely should. I love deck builders.
When we've added this synergy with spelling, word crafting games, and it's the perfect union, in my mind. In Paperback, you use your points that you've generated to buy better letters. And sometimes the card can even have 2 letters on the same card, like a TH
Right.
or an IN, right? So you can create longer words with more letters, generating more points. In Paperback, you're putting cards into your deck that will generate victory points at the end of the game. Hardback borrows from some next generation deck builders. Now cards in the offer row belong to different suits or genres, and each suit offers different deck building powers that can synergize with other cards of the same suit for even greater effects. Horror, adventure, mystery, romance. One genre might help you with trashing cards from your deck, while another focuses on point generation. So Hardback then now adds this other layer of, we're not just dealing with word generation and trying to create nice long words, we're dealing with the synergies of the different genres. And if you put a bunch of mystery cards in your deck, and if you create a word with more than one mystery card, they power each other. It's a thing we've seen with Marvel Legendary and Star Realms, 2 other very popular deck builders. And so with that mechanism now involved, you're adding this other layer of complexity, which doesn't necessarily mean that now Hardback is the better game by any means.
No.
There's just different flavors for different game styles.
Yeah.
Because we have currencies in the game that are used to generate more cards, there is a mechanism in both games that allow you to open your hand up to your opponents and invite them to create a better word with your cards.
Okay.
And if they can do that, if they can create a higher payout for your cards, you can give them a penny for your next purchase on the next round, or in Hardback, it's ink.
Okay.
Is this other mechanism that they've added. The ink is kind of interesting because it's a second currency on top of what you're using to purchase cards, and it's a press your luck mechanism. You can spend ink to draw more cards so you can create bigger words, but the cards you draw, you have to include into your words. So if you draw 2 letters that aren't going to go well together, then you've kind of painted yourself into a corner. But that's another, again, they've gamified this portion of the spelling game that adds another layer of complexity. I'm not going to say one game is better than the other. They're both different enough.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
That you can play both. There is room in your collection for both games. I own more than one deck builder. It makes sense. Deck builders are fantastic.
Right.
We would maybe consider this subgenre being niche enough to only need one game, but there is just there's enough mechanism going on that there's plenty of game for both.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure which one that I like better. I think I like them both equally. I think that talking about them both in the same segment makes sense because they are very similar. They're both deck builders. And when I think about how much I enjoy them, I have love for them equally. And in different ways and for different reasons, perhaps. Actually, the artwork on the cards are really cool too. I think the way the genres are depicted as sort of spines of books, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And the font looks, for the one genre is all the same and it matches the genre. It really works well. I think I would say, and tell me if you agree with this, I would say that if I was playing with, a neighbor who was in their 60s or 70s and had only ever played Scrabble, but they'd played it a lot, I would be more inclined to teach them paperback than I would hardback.
Yeah.
And if I was playing with someone who liked Dominion or other deck builder games and was open to the idea of the word game, I would try hardback with them.
Agreed.
Would you agree with that? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Paperback is more of a word game and hardback is more of a deck builder, even though they're both deck building word games.
Yeah, they both do that very well. It's an interesting little combination of games because they do very different things in a very similar way on a very similar theme and feel very different somehow. I love deck builders. I own far too many of them and want to buy more and more and more of them as it goes along. And these two are amongst my favorites, that's for sure. Yeah,
nice.
I like them a lot. Good choices. Really, really good choices.
Nice. Have you played any of the games that we've talked about in this episode? What word crafting games did we miss? We want to hear from you. Drop us an email at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to the Escape Into Board Games podcast. Be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Escape Into Board Games.
This episode is produced by Matt McKenzie and Chris Cormier. Production assistance by Sherry Cormier. Music by John Yasut and Daniel Carlton. See you at the next Escape.